Welcome to the Keiser-Report. I'm Max Keiser. America is a frickin' gulag. That's right. America is becoming a gulag. What if Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, had done 50 years in prison for his blue box shenanigans, in which he used an authorized and unauthorized device to make free phone calls, instead of hanging out with the president? Or if Mark Zuckerberg had done 30 years for illegally accessing Harvard's computer databases to create the first Facebook, instead of hanging out with the president? What if America began sending its best, its brightest, its innovators and intellectual troublemakers, not to the moon, or to the NASDAQ, or to the boardroom, but to the gulag? Not to university or to the White House, but to the gulag. When it starts doing that, you know then that it is, in fact, a deadbeat nation, a gulag nation, and a shell of its former self. Stacy Herbert?
Yes, Max. This is referring to Aaron Swartz, the internet activist, the man responsible for stopping SOPA. The young man, 26, he killed himself a little bit over a week ago. Now, I've been thinking about the fact that tyranny has been in the news. It's been on CNN, the Young Turks, MSNBC. Everybody's covering this story, this interview that Alex Jones gave with Piers Morgan. And the news here, the local news on Channel 4, BBC, they're covering the fact that Americans are afraid of tyranny. And yet when you look at it, there's no habeas corpus, there's no due process. The Obama administration says they can assassinate American citizens without due process. And they're locking up activists such as Aaron Swartz for 30, 40, 50 years. Some internet activists are facing 100 and something years in prison. And to me, that seems like what you used to see with gulags. It's an extreme punishment for what are the brightest people in the world. Sometimes you see these really, really, really brilliant 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and okay, they make a mistake, maybe they do a minor offense, maybe they should be punished a little bit for hacking into some computer system like Stratfor. But should they face 125 years in prison? Well, yeah, I mean, do you want my interpretation of the Second Amendment? Sure. Okay, it's there supposedly to give Americans the option to violently insurrect against tyranny. That's what a gun does. A gun is not there to pick your nose. A gun is supposed to be there as an instrument to fight tyranny. The threshold over which the U.S. government has passed in terms of tyranny has been passed. They passed it when they got rid of habeas corpus. They passed it when they went through the NDAA. They passed it when they started to murder U.S. citizens extrajudicially. They passed it with the Bradford Manning case. The Bradley Manning?
The Bradley Manning case. They passed it. They've already passed the threshold of tyranny. So why are Americans sitting there with their thumb up their schwing, talking about, well, if tyranny comes? That's why I find it hypocritical.
But before there's a Second Amendment, there's a First Amendment. And before those amendments, and before the Constitution, there's a preamble to the Constitution. It says, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union. So that's the number one reason why they create a Constitution. Number two, establish justice. There should be a justice system under which all are treated equally. So we're going to turn to Aaron Swartz, who killed himself because of the U.S. Attorney in Massachusetts, Carmen Ortiz's office. It is the product of a criminal justice system rife with intimidation and prosecutorial overreach. That is a quote from Lawrence Lessig, and it's the headline for this piece on Hullabaloo written by Digby. And remember, Hullabaloo, by the way, she named it Hullabaloo, her site, because one function of blogs is to cause a ruckus. Now remember, this is part of the shutting down of the American mind, is they don't like ruckus, they don't like, you know, troublemakers, they don't like any little inconvenience in their life. Now she says, the behavior exhibited towards Swartz is more akin to something we might have seen in the Eastern Bloc during the Cold War. There is also a badly needed discussion about the government's willingness to intercede heavily on behalf of business interests while simultaneously allowing business to go unpunished for their crimes. That's always been true to some extent, but we've reached a point at which they aren't even hiding it.
So who is the King George in this situation? Well, it's the MPAA, essentially the Motion Picture Association of America, and Chris Dodd. They're the ones that have decided that anyone on the internet who dares to challenge their outdated monopoly in the copyright cartel should be executed. As Aaron's dad said, the state killed his son. And by extension, you could say Chris Dodd killed Aaron Swartz. And Chris Dodd is a tyrannical enemy of the people.
It is the old-fashioned word of corporatism. The original meaning of the word, according to Mussolini, is the merger of state and corporation. But here we see, whether it's Hollywood, we also see, you know, animal rights activists facing decades in prison if they film factory farming. We see environmentalists who, okay, some of them do commit crimes, but are they punishable by 50 years for burning an SUV? Does that require 50 years in prison? No, but it now falls under the Patriot Act, another original erosion of constitutional rights.
And the genius of Aaron Swartz was that he realized that all those activists, animal rights activists, environmental activists, they all channeled back to the copyright and the copyright monopoly that's being controlled by MPAA and Chris Dodd, and that the copyright issue is the linchpin issue of all activist issues. As we've been saying for many years, I myself have been an activist in this space as well. And but getting back to gun rights, I mean, I don't understand the NRA, the National Rifle Association. They're obviously in the pocket of gun sellers. They're not in the interest of the people of America, because we've passed the threshold of tyranny a half a dozen to a dozen times already. They're just simply sucking the money out of these poor people. They're treating American people like whores and pimps. The NRA is pathetic.
However, in today's world, I really think you will not have the sympathy of the rest of the world. If the Palestinians fight back, people call them terrorists. If the Egyptian people in Cairo ever fought back, if they ever used a weapon, America was so ready to call these people terrorists. But they sat there unarmed. Yemen is the second most armed nation in the world. Have they been able to stop one single drone? No. You can't stop the drones, but the internet enables you to connect with 6.5 billion people around the world and stop corporatism from happening. But let's turn to this notion of establishing justice, because the U.S. Attorney Carmen Ortiz says stealing is stealing whether you use a computer command or a crowbar. So again, that's supposed to be, she's saying it's equal. Whether you use a crowbar or a computer command to steal, you should be treated equally in front of the law. So let's look to the next headline from her own Department of Justice, how they treated HSBC, too big to prosecute. This is from December of 2012. Europe's largest bank will avoid a potentially crippling criminal prosecution for its role in moving cash for known terror groups, Mexican drug cartels, and rogue governments such as Iran, instead agreeing to pay a record $2 billion settlement, U.S. Justice Department officials announced at a press conference. Announcement of the immense fine was overshadowed by efforts to explain why, in one of the clearest cases of criminal money laundering in recent memory, no one would be facing jail time. Criminal conviction on money laundering violations would have also forcibly prevented HSBC from doing business in the United States. So where's the established justice?
No, there's no justice for banksters. That's clear. And talk about tyranny, and we should mention that HSBC and Barclays Bank are terrorists, full stop. But I wanted to talk about this idea of stealing as it applies to intellectual property and copyright. When Ortiz says that stealing is stealing, she misses the whole point of copyright and what Thomas Jefferson argued back again in the formation of the Constitution, that he was saying there is no basis actually for there to be any copyright law or monopoly protection for ideas. They compromised and went for the 28 years protection from monopoly. All ideas, all creative works come from the public domain and should return to the public domain. This idea of a hard-clad definition of stealing is still very much to be debated. Ortiz, or Carmen Ortiz, hasn't read the Constitution, hasn't read anything about law pertaining to intellectual property, and is a rogue government official. She's a tyrant. She's rogue. She's just passing edicts and laws that are not adherence to any jurisprudence whatsoever. She's a completely out-of-control rogue maniac. That's the person that deserves to be in the gulag.
I don't think she's rogue. I think she's abiding by how the administration behaves. This is how they behave towards WikiLeaks. This is how they behave towards Jeremy Hammond.
That's tyranny! When you behave against the Constitution, it's tyrannical! And it says in the Second Amendment to overthrow!
I don't think it's Carmen Ortiz just being rogue. I think this is how the administration, her Department of Justice, behaves towards Jeremy Hammond, towards WikiLeaks, towards Barrett Brown, towards environmentalists, towards other activists. However, they have always let go the financial criminals. For the past 4 years, 5 years of this financial crisis, they have always repeatedly allowed no crime seems to be too great. And this HSBC case even prompted the likes of Jack Blum, an international banking expert in Washington, D.C., to say, quote, "How much more do you need to know? These people managed to cross virtually every line that was crossed. It was an astonishing amount of criminal behavior." So I ask again, there's this point of, like, where they're openly like a Mao, a Pol Pot, in terms of, they're not committing mass murder of their own population, but they have shut down the ideas, the unruly ideas, as they call it, the sort of playful cleverness of the internet, the new generation of this whole so-called knowledge economy, where they've just decided to give up.
Well, they are causing tens of millions to go back into poverty, and a lot of those people will die. So it is causing mass death. But you know, the word that you just used that's key there is behaviorally. This is what they they believe in. But the behavior has nothing to do with the rule of law. They're not obeying the rule of law, or even the rule of the Constitution, or even the spirit of the Constitution. They're just acting out as sociopaths and psychopaths, and any time they get caught, they rewrite the law. They rewrite the rules. That's why the U.S. is in dire straits, is that there's no rule of law.
Well, finally, you know, The Economist magazine, even on the death of Aaron Swartz, this is what he says, and it's something to think about as you, you know, contemplate this act of what is happening in the U.S. To call Aaron Swartz gifted would be to miss the point. As far as the internet was concerned, he was the gift. And remember, that is the act that he did. He ended SOPA, and they're already trying to come at us again with this new international UN one. But he stopped SOPA from happening, and we could still do it. One individual can stop tyranny.
Of course they can, and they'll gun them down as they pop up, unless the society decides to embrace what is said in the documents of human rights and the rights of man and the Enlightenment. If you want to go back to the medieval neo-feudalism and be a serf, that's your choice. All right, Stacy Herbert, thank you.
Thank you, Max.
Stay tuned for the second half. We've got Alex Jones.
I'm here with some investors from England.
Okay.
I'm here to show a new client who wants to buy property in this area. Any non-Jewish parts you can see?
No, not from here.
Hello?
Annexation, occupation, two-state solution. Who cares as long as the property is cheap?
It all starts here.
It's so beautiful.
All of us is ours.
Welcome back to the Keiser-Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Austin, Texas, to talk with Alex Jones of Infowars.com. Alex, we have in the United States the abandonment of habeas corpus. We've got the Patriot Act. We've got the NDAA. We've got extrajudicial murders of U.S. citizens. We've got Bradley Manning being held without charge. How would you define tyranny in America, Alex Jones?
We are now seeing highway checkpoints without warrants, quote, looking for gang members where they search your vehicle. Whether you're for gun control or not, they now have the federal government announcing we're just going to put pressure and muscle and threats on gun dealers and manufacturers outside of law. We are seeing situations where taxes in some cases are being doubled or tripled. We're seeing taxes increased on poor people. We're seeing the ultra rich basically exempt. Did I mention, all of the warrantless wiretapping by the NSA, the TSA sticking their hands down our pants? The police courts have ruled can taser you to make you answer questions. There's no more Fifth Amendment. It is insane. If you read a dystopic novel, or if you go look at what dystopic real countries have done, like Nazi Germany or other cases, America is rapidly becoming that, and then some. But you kind of have parallel systems. You still have some of the old freedoms left, and people think they're free, and there's still some First Amendment. But it doesn't matter. The tyrants are just moving forward, and both parties are controlled by the very same mega banks that you have exposed, Max. And it just gets worse and worse and worse by the minute. And now you have Germany pulling their gold out, a bunch of other countries.
Okay, we're going to get to Germany in a second. Let me just focus on this idea of tyranny for a second. Now, I've been on your show a few times. We've talked about the banks and the mega banks, et cetera. But this idea of tyranny as it relates to the Second Amendment and gun ownership and gun control, and of course this is a huge topic now across the country in the United States. My point that I've made on your show before, and I'd like to ask you, make the point again. If the people who are owning guns are doing so because their interpretation of the Second Amendment is that they need to protect themselves against government and against tyranny, and we just listed 15 examples of that threshold that has been crossed by the government.
What are they waiting for? What are they waiting for?
That's right. So why they've got the guns, they've got the imperative from the mandate from the Constitution. What are they waiting for?
Listen, I agree that this country's been occupied by the globalists, by the banksters. They've bragged in financial publications. They've taken us over. They've taken over much of Europe. They're now installing leaders. And it's the final straw. People can have their bank account stolen, have the value of their dollar destroyed. They can have their privacy stolen. They can have their dignity stolen by the TSA now with highway checkpoints. But it is the fact that people remember the stories of the Founding Fathers in 1776. They're like, oh, now I get it. You want me to be under a tyranny. So it's kind of that final straw. And Ron Paul was on my syndicated radio show last week, the outgoing congressman, and he said this will cause a civil war. And that's the point. The military-industrial complex owned by these foreign banks, these offshore banks, not even foreign, they want to start a civil war. They want to start a conflict because no one's ever stopped them. They're like criminals that never get caught, so they get crazier and crazier, and start, leaving their calling card when they rob a bank. They are now openly saying all of Homeland Security is for libertarians and conservatives and gun owners. Not that conservatives didn't support Bush and his tyranny. It's just the establishment sees people who at least say they're pro-free market and pro-liberty as the enemy. We are going into a receivership, collectivism, implosion by design to bring us to our knees like the people of Greece and now Italy and other countries. We are under the very same occupation, the bankster occupation that you've talked about, and it is just a nightmare to behold. So when I was on Piers Morgan and I said, if you keep pushing, it's going to cost 1776 Part 2, I was just letting them know, look, I understand the game plan. You guys in the internal Homeland Security documents for a decade that have now been public for 4 years that we got from law enforcement that were confirmed to be accurate. Gun owners, libertarians, returning veterans, land rights activists, anti-Federal Reserve activists, Occupy Wall Street people, anti-war people, anybody who knows the system's corrupt, left, right, or center, anybody who's got an IQ above room temperature, anybody who can tie their shoelaces, anybody that knows we've got crooks running things in both parties is being listed as the new enemy, and they want to kick off this new purge going after gun owners.
Right, I want to jump ahead because certainly there's been a lot. Your show every single day, Infowars.com. It's fantastic discussion about this every day. I wanted to talk a little bit about Aaron Swartz because we paid a tribute to Aaron on the show. An internet activist who committed suicide last week. His father basically blamed the government. He said, the government killed my son. Another act of blatant tyranny, it would seem. Your thoughts on this and the increasingly aggressive crackdown on alternative media and activist Alex Jones?
Well, what they do is they indict you for going and getting taxpayer-paid-for research papers over the last 30 years that we all paid for at MIT, that everybody deserves to see, and he put them out as an act of resistance, and it was just academic research papers, most of it obsolete, and they were trying to put him in jail for 35 years. Now, a lot of times they indict you and then say you're depressed and kill you. This is the guy that helped coordinate, at the very core, the defeat of SOPA and CISPA. This is a guy who was fighting on every level, and I don't necessarily believe that they didn't actually physically kill him, not just harass him until he committed suicide. You know, you have like a 97% conviction rate in federal courts because they're kangaroo courts and have selected juries. Nazi Germany had juries. They were just selected juries. I mean, you don't have 97% conviction rates in a free country. Give me a break. I mean, it's turned out with DNA, 37% of people on death row on average are innocent. And it comes out all the time. They know people are innocent and frame them. I know people who've been released from prison who had no criminal record and were put on death row just because they felt like doing it. So, yeah, we have a lot of psychopaths. Psychopaths that are attracted to government power. That's 101. Criminology. And look, Gary Webb told me he was coming on my show in 3 months, the Pulitzer Prize winner for Dark Alliance on CIA drug dealing. And they tried to discredit him. He had a new book coming out doubly proving that he'd been accurate. And he told people, 3 people I talked to, his friends, and I talked to him, he said he was being harassed, that people were breaking in his house, special forces type guys were sliding down the poles, you know, the drainage pipes, I mean, like commandos, robbing him, stealing his papers. He was being death threatened. He moved, and they came and shot him twice in the head, and the police said that's quite normal. So if anybody ever shoots and kills me, and then says, I did it. It is a lie. It is a lie. It is a lie. And they always have a, quote, friend pop up and go, you know, I know Gary said he wouldn't commit suicide, but he told me he was. The D.C. madam told me on air she was being followed and threatened. She would never commit suicide. And they whacked her and had a fake suicide note that wasn't even the same handwriting. I mean, I got that from her condo manager.
Okay.
Who was her good
well,
friend.
You know, I think people, you know, need to visit Texas, and they'll find out that it's a state full of people like Alex Jones. You are Texas. You are Austin. You are Alex Jones, and the rest of the world needs to understand what Texas is all about for real. Now, I want to ask you about, again, coming back to Piers Morgan for a second. CNN host, of course, you were on a show recently, caused a bit of a stir. Many American progressives and liberals don't know about Piers Morgan's past in the UK of phone hacking, publishing fake photos, trading on shares which had his tabloid was pumping and dumping. Why does Piers get a get-free pass in America? He's an acknowledged dangerous element here in the UK. That's one of the reasons he's in the U.S., to escape prosecution here in the UK.
He is a gangster. And when I was with him in person, I mean, he came off as a cold-blooded, you know, reptile type person. And at the end of the interview, I got in his face and I said, look, buddy, I know you're a gangster and you're not getting our Second Amendment. You're on notice. And he laughed at me and he said, we'll see. He's put out tweets saying, I'm British, I'm better than Americans, I'm conquering you. Bizarre stuff. He's put out tweets saying, I am standing on the dead bodies of the children. And again, he got fired from one newspaper, as you were reporting, for publishing fake photos. You know, all the connections, him over these hackers. He's a hatchet man, and that's why I blew up and got in his face to go, look, cut the crap, man. We know what you're really here for. But here's the news. The guy's got 500,000 viewers. His audience doubled after I was on there for a week. Now the ratings have gone back down. He is a legend in his own mind. I mean, I have conservatively 3 million listeners a day on terrestrial radio. Over 1 million people on YouTube watching one way or another every day. That's 4 million.
Okay, that brings up an interesting point, Alex, and that you really saved his bacon to some degree because he was about to get canceled. Everyone hated him after he came on board from Larry King. He was a stuck-up, you know, plump Brit who seemed to, you know, be in league with the worst elements of aristocratic skullduggery, and you suddenly made him part of the conversation. So looking back now, Alex, do you feel maybe some regret in having made Piers Morgan part of the American conversation? You saved his job, Alex Jones. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Alex?
Well, I don't think I saved his job because they're looking. He's got a year left on his 3-year contract of $8 million. They report he's probably going to be moved to the 10 o'clock slot. It was like a sugar fix. Yeah, he went from 500,000 to 1 million plus viewers for the next 3 or 4 days. Those numbers are already going down back to the ridiculous 500,000 viewers. I mean, what a joke. Larry King, you know, 7, 8 years ago had 10 million viewers. I mean, this guy is a joke, but all of the dinosaur media is a joke. Sure, I mean, it got him to be part of the conversation. So I think it made Alex Jones even more a larger part of the discussion. I think that's the effect that it had, ramming the issue out of, look, taking our guns is about slavery and tyranny. The White House responded that night at the end of the show to my petition and, quote, denied it to deport his butt for the different activities that he's engaged in, trying to manipulate our internal politics. And now Obama in his speech yesterday undoubtedly said there's these pundits who say it's about tyranny and enslavement. They just want to make money, clearly attacking me. So I now have the White House officially responding in huge press conferences to us, okay? That's the truth. Piers Morgan had to admit, yes, you have tens of millions of overall listeners every week. You shouldn't have this platform. You know, night after night, he said, somebody needs to shoot this guy. He talked about how he wants to kill me. Did you see that? I mean, they're panicking. They're a bunch of gangsters, and their time is running out.
We're out of time. Thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Max, thank you for having me, and folks can follow me at Real Alex Jones on Twitter and Infowars.com, and say hi to all your great crew there for me.
All right, fantastic. All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Alex Jones of Infowars.com. If you'd like to contact us, please tweet us at Keiser-Report or at Facebook.com/Keiser-Report. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.